Welcome to our show, the new one called Dog Sock. Really pleased to have you here and hope you've been enjoying the show so far. So as you know, each week we capture on challenges that are going through your life at this very moment. Over the last 2 episodes we've introduced the Wheel of Life. We've introduced ways to improve your daily routine so that you get more balance and some happiness and some joy just from the daily things that you do. So as you know, in our 10-week challenge, which I hope you've all been doing, we've picked upon 4 different topics which we'll try and explore in the coming episodes. They are health, there is wealth, there's happiness, which we call relationships, which we'll come on to introduce our expert for today, and spirituality. So if you've picked up on one of those 4 challenges perhaps in life and you just like some help and guidance, please do get in contact with us. Here at Sangat TV through the reception, you can get hold of myself, your host, Gurjit Rana, or we can put you in contact with experts in the field. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you today to our resident expert on relationships, and mainly to help us move forward in all kinds of relationship challenges that you may be facing. So, I call upon Anna Garcia. Anna, welcome. Sasrikal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on board to help our viewers to understand some of the simple relationships challenges that happen on a day-to-day basis. And as a culture, as a religion, sometimes we just forget that these are challenges that everybody faces. And I know that's not the case, that's not true, and it's all about the individuals that are involved in the challenges. And I know from your many years of experience that you've got lots to add today. So, just as an introduction to our viewers, can I just ask you to give yourself a bit of an overview of what you do and how long you've been doing it?
Yeah, sure. So I run a program called Relationships Intensive. So I'm a relationships coach. I specialise in working with women. I've been a facilitator for the last 14 years. I think it's more than that now. And the last 10 years I have specialised in working with women. So whether they're married, single, complicated, confused, or all of the above, that is the place to be. So it is an incredible role where we really get women to allow themselves to be vulnerable, to expose what their deepest concerns are that maybe they haven't felt comfortable enough to express at home or with their partners or etc. And as a result, it has an impact on their family, it has an impact on, their friendships, their work, and every area of life. So it has an impact on everybody. So we get many happy husbands as well.
Excellent. That's what we want to hear. So some of the challenges that I know that the Asian ladies out there, you're very welcome to call into the show, of course. Some of the challenges that we face within our community is that we become stuck with our challenges, and we always kind of project onto other people thinking, well, they did this to me and they're wrong, and we sometimes get just stuck and going, well, that's my fate and that's what I've been served. And I kind of, when I think about the challenges that I personally have gone through, and sometimes the clients that approach me, I always think, do you know what? There's more to this than we know. And it's all about sharing, how do we overcome these challenges and where do they come from? And I think that's the first area that people are in denial of. Ultimately going, no, the problem's not with me, because they're so consumed by what the problem is, the peripheral argument, as I like to call it, that they actually don't actually know where the challenge is. And I know that you've quite explored this with people as well. How do you get to the root of what the real challenge is for that person?
That's an awesome point. I believe there are 2 types of ladies that I work with, 2 types of people. The first one, what's going on and why. That's all she wants to know. Is like, why is this happening to me again and again and again? Tend to repeat the same situations with different people, for example. And the second type of person that comes along is like, I've had enough now. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. I need help. How do I shift this, right?
Yeah.
So the first step is awareness. what do I need to become aware of? And when people become aware, they're able to then transition from a space of blaming somebody into a space of taking responsibility. But that takes a lot of courage, and sometimes some people can have the blessing or the luck to have that. Naturally they're inclined to develop that awareness, but most of us, we have to go through enough pain to then kind of get that slap to say, oh my goodness, I need to do something about this. So awareness is the first step, definitely, and then it's having either enough pain or motivation or inspiration to want to take that next step, which is how do I then shift this? So the awareness leads to you being able to take responsibility. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm 100% responsible for my 50% of the relationship.
Absolutely.
And that is actually, as scary as it is from one side, once you cross to the other side, it's really important. It actually allows you to feel, hang on a minute, I'd rather be responsible than at the effect of the other person or the situation, right?
And that's half the challenge. I think that people are so caught up in the argument or the disagreement, and I don't just mean between husband and wife, between daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, or between children and pets. It can happen with any kind of relationships, and I think half that challenge comes with going, I'm still blaming the other person, and then even if they say they can do something about it, they go, yeah, but nothing's going to change. And that, I think, comes with, I always think you've got to allow the client, always allow the person to come to you, to come to that realisation for themselves, right? Where again, through culture or just through their own belief system, that I know I've accepted it, this is what my fate is. And it's so disheartening, because I feel that this is a subject that we need to open up to actually show people there are so many options, so many choices, and it's sometimes the fatal choice that some women tend to take, of going, well, it either means I leave the situation, unfortunately means divorce, or separation from the family, and they kind of, or they take it the other way and going, the fear of that is what's keeping them in where they're at. Does that make sense? Sorry, should I say? It keeps them in the same place and in that same challenge day after day. So how do you help those clients? Because I know you do deal with a lot of our Asian sisters out there.
So people generally come from two places. You either come from a space of fear or you come from a space of love. So when you're coming from a space of fear, whether you choose to stay or to go, it is going to create results that are undesirable. So the important thing is to work on how do we get to a space of love. Now, love is about being in power. It's about being in abundance. When we're in fear, we're in scarcity. So we're thinking, oh my God, can I afford to do it? Can I do this? Can I do that? And we're also in force-based energy. So it's very difficult. Everything's difficult. It's hard work. So the work really is understanding the importance that you have as an individual. I believe that every individual is a CEO, a Chief Energy Officer, which means that wherever you go, your energy introduces itself before you do. Okay, the same in your family. Wherever you are at energetically will impact everyone else in the family. So it is vital to learn how to make that shift, and that's the kind of work that we then go and do with people, which is shifting you from a space of should I not, should I make an effort, should I not, is there any point, and sometimes we find that people give up a bit early, and sometimes people have been going on way beyond they needing to, so making that shift from that fear-based into a power or love-based energy is at the foundation of being able to take the right actions.
I mean, a lot of people, that's the challenge with it, is they can either go what I like to call the spiral effect or the self-talk. And we all know when we are feeling really good and really happy, we've got the right music, we've got the right people around us, we're going out, we're doing a lot more with our life, we're just in a really good, happy place. Then something comes along and we go, oh, that's just knocked me off my perch. And you get back up and you carry on. And then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then you get to a point where you start to accept it, and the opposite starts to happen, where you're spiralling down. And that's when you kind of go, well, okay, I can't change the people because I'm married to them or I live with them, or I can't change, and I say the synthetics of you can change some things. So for example, where you work, or the people, how much time you choose to spend with them. But that self-spiral, how do you catch that of knowing, okay, I'm about to go on my downward spiral as opposed to kicking in my upward spiral?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we all know when we have that shift in energy. We all know. We all know when we're having a bad day. We all know when something, and it's really funny because suddenly the world begins to respond to you differently. You know, people don't smile to you as much, or synchronicities no longer happen as much, or, you know, so the moment you see that happening, it's really about observing your thoughts. I think one of the biggest addictions that we have as human beings, particularly in relationships, is our addiction to thought. And we spend, most people spend at least 90% of their time in fear-based thoughts, and we're not aware of that. So it's about becoming aware. Hang on a minute, are my thoughts in love or in fear? And it's about, number one, starting to become aware of where your thoughts are living. Number two, starting to make a conscious effort to shift them. So if I'm catching myself, for example, one very typical one in disaster relationships, because you know there are two types of relationships, master relationships, disaster relationships. Disaster relationships, you want to think, just observe for one day, what kind of thoughts are you having about your partner? And if the majority of them are derogatory, judgmental, critical, then you need to be reevaluating that. And very often it happens that one partner, generally speaking the female partner, is having very derogatory, critical, judgmental thoughts of the male partner. And then when you ask the male partner, actually he has really positive thoughts about his female partner.
He just sees it as, just had an argument, just a lover's tip, and they kind of move on for it. Whereas as a female, we're like, hold on to it and kind of go, this is what's happened to me, and you're kind of like, is he going to apologise yet? Is he going to apologise yet? And that's, again, when I like to say, it's not a downfall of our religion, but we're not, say religion, just sometimes our culture is, it's not easy for people to step forward and say sorry. And that's the first thing, you know, that I kind of approach clients with. And definitely on our last show we talked a lot about forgiveness, and it's almost, it's not sometimes forgiving the other person, it's forgiving yourself. Because I think then you can learn to be a bit more compassionate and start to work through your problems, as opposed to going, no, I'm going to stay under my ground. Because, you know, I know you've often said it, of going, you can be happy or you can be right.
And we like being right. I want to be right. I want to be right. And we create such misery out of wanting to be right. Our ego, our conditioning, our fear-based conditioning wants us to be right because it feels like it's surviving that way. But it's really funny, you know, look, going to the way that the women think and the way that the men think. What's really interesting is when, if you and I as a couple have an argument in the morning, the men have an incredible ability to compartmentalize. So they have a box for each area of their life, and the boxes don't touch. So if they have an argument with you in the morning, they're very capable to leave the house and go into work, and it's just done with. You know, it gets put in that compartment, and you know, and they have a mum in the compartment, and they have their money in the compartment, and they have everything in different compartments, and they don't touch. Women, on the other hand, the brain works quite differently. We're like a spaghetti. So when we're having an argument with our husband, it connects with how we feel about our mother, and how we feel about our finances, and how we feel about work, and everything's just bzzz.
It just triggers, doesn't it? It's like, well, like a domino effect, and that one, and that one, and that one. And then on our good day, we're like, everything's fine. What's yesterday about? I know you're at home thinking that.
And so that's why very often we get so frustrated with the male, because the male seems to not care. They just compartmentalize. So they're quite happy to carry on generally. This is a generalization, obviously, but generally speaking, we find that men are quite happy to move from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And the really ironic thing is they've even got the nothing box. Did you know that, Gashi?
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, they've got. Would you like to know about the nothing box?
Tell me about the nothing box.
Because this is one of the big problems between men and women. You know, women, we have been conditioned. I think, and I find this very much in this culture. We've been conditioned to always have our mind occupied with something, and we need to be responsible for something, and we certainly don't want to be sitting around doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to be doing something to justify our existence.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Because otherwise, well, what are you doing? What do you mean you're just chilling there, you know? So, on the other hand, men naturally have the nothing box. So you may ask your husband or partner or boyfriend, whoever, brother, what are you thinking? Nothing. What are you doing? Nothing. What are you watching on telly? Nothing. And it drives us crazy. And they really do have the nothing box. We don't have that because we have been conditioned from childhood that there's always something we must be doing, or we must be taking care of, or is that right?
Absolutely. For a lot of our, again, Asian girls, or certainly growing up, it's always about, right, do what mum is saying, make sure you're cleaning the house, make sure you're cooking, or you, like you say, you're constantly doing something that's related to either house chores, something to do with education. And I think that's possibly one of the challenges now, that we've learned to be so independent as women, to take care of household staff, work staff, that we've almost stepped away from being our feminine energy.
Yes.
We've moved more into our male energy, and yet we still feel like, right, okay, how do I step back?
Yes.
You know, and that's one of the challenges. And then secondly, as you say, in the nothing box, you know, the other category that kind of comes to mind is going, well, I have to do everything for them. You know, nobody does anything unless I'm doing it for them.
Oh, we love that one. We love wearing that with a badge of honour. No one would do it, so I'll get it done. That's all right. I got it done. What's wrong? Nothing. We've got the what's wrong? Nothing approach, right? And that's when it's really dangerous. When a woman says nothing, honey, is everything okay? You know, what's the matter? Nothing. Oh, men, we're in trouble. You know, we're in trouble. I love that you brought up the masculine and the feminine. You know, roles were very clear in the past.
Yes.
Back in the day, you know, it was very traditional, wasn't it? And so the women knew what their role was, and it may be dull or whatever, but it was the way it was. Yeah, I've got this very typical, you know, image of women with the apron on and the baking gloves and the children running around her,
and the chapatis at home.
Right, and then the male heading out to work or whatever, running his business, etc. Things changed, and they changed dramatically. And so now everybody's a bit confused. Women have been conditioned and trained to become leaders, to become communicators, to become assertive, and all these things, which are wonderful for career. However, when it comes to the relationship, in order for a relationship to have that spark, to have that intimacy and connection, it requires polarity. Polarity means opposites, right? So that magnetism, which requires someone to be in their masculine and someone to be in their feminine. We also call it dynamic and magnetic energies, right? And what happens when, as women, we're constantly in our masculine energy, especially if you're raising children and you're running a profession or a career or even running the home, you know, you become the person with the trousers, don't you? And you lead and all of that. Women are becoming very confused, and so are men. They're becoming very confused because what we're doing is we're depolarizing our relationships, and then we're wondering, well, where's the intimacy, where's the connection, where's that affinity? Well, what's happening is, as women, we are so much in our masculine energy that we don't allow the masculine in. We don't allow them to help us feel safe anymore. We try and go it alone a lot. And when I speak to women in this community, I speak to women, they say, oh my goodness, how do you know? Are you my head? How do you know? I'm like, yeah, you spend a lot of time in your head, for sure. Right?
Absolutely.
And this is where we now have a bit of an issue. Women have become so independent, which is great when it comes to career, but we don't know how to take the foot off the pedal when it comes to the men at home. And so that is very core to learn, is how do we take the foot off the pedal? And that's what I specialize in. How? Because what's happening is we're depolarizing, we're not allowing for intimacy, which is intimacy.
Yes.
Right? Which requires vulnerability. That requires a lot of magnetic energy.
And where we get used to, I say we, as a lot of ladies will know, they kind of go the opposite way, which is like the barriers go up even more, and if you've said something to me, it's like, oh my gosh. What would you say for when you've got two really strong female characters in the family? So you know where I'm heading with this one.
Go on. Yes, I do.
So a lot of you know, families in our culture still choose to live as an extended family, or we've now moved on to that generation, I guess, of, you know, you can live nearby, but you still have a lot to do with each other. You know, like Indian families, we have to be around each other. That's the natural way of families and evolution that we've seen. But as we're getting this independency, I mean, I've already kind of noticed that firstly there's a generation gap, that's a given, and in one of the ways I've kind of been learning is going, actually you need to understand where your mother-in-law is coming from, or your mother, just as you would at home, but you still kind of hear quite a lot, again, as you know, from the clients that come to you, going, okay, I've got challenges, and it's not necessarily the husband, it's not necessarily the children, it's that one there, it's going, it's just as fierce as me. What's your
you haven't said what it is.
It's the mother-in-law. You're going to get the elephant.
Yes, let's get the elephant out in the room. Yes.
Yes, so it is the mother-in-law, because I always kind of play it down and going, okay, what are you projecting onto her?
Yeah.
That's my kind of open question to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the number one issue that I get from this community. Yeah. Anna, there is a third person in my relationship, ultimately, to be blunt.
Yes.
And it causes a lot of issues. And it really, yes, there's, on the one hand, there is taking responsibility for where am I not wanting to connect with my mother-in-law? Where am I resisting mother-in-law? That's a huge thing, and yes, we can work on that because you're the CEO. Yeah, wherever you are at energetically will impact that relationship. However, here's one for the men. Can we have one for the men?
Oh, we definitely need one for them.
And for the mother-in-laws.
Yes.
Yeah?
I know where this is going. Go for it.
And I work specifically with women, and one of my ideal clients, they're 50 plus ladies, and one of the issues that I need to address with them is the fact that the nature of the relationship that they're having with their sons is not supporting their marriages, is not supporting their children's marriages. Yeah. So we're getting a lot of what we call mem. Am I allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, of course you can.
So
everyone's kind of like when you go, what?
mem. So mem is a mother-enmeshed man. And we have a lot of these today, okay, as a result of the relationship between the mum. Can I explain where it comes from?
Yeah, of course.
So, generally speaking, mother may have a bit of trauma or hardship in her relationship, in her marriage, etc. And what will tend to happen is mother will tend to project this onto son, younger boy, for rescue, for support, emotionally, etc. So what happens in that instance, generally speaking, the boy will reject the masculine because he sees the masculine is causing pain to mum, and he becomes a little hero. But what he's doing in the process is he's rejecting leadership and commitment. Okay, he becomes enmeshed with his mother. Now, as much as he may grow up and may get married and may bring the wife in or may go off with the wife, there is a guilt pattern that is built between him and his mother that he doesn't manage to let go of. So as much as he may be married, he still holds his first loyalty to his mother if he hasn't done the healing work as a child, as a boy. So generally speaking, what we're finding is that they're boys still as much as they're in men's bodies. And their main priority is to keep mum happy. But we know that that is a formula, as heartbreaking as it may be for many mother-in-laws out there and mothers. The reality is, and I've seen this hundreds and hundreds of times, it is the main cause of tension in a relationship is that his loyalty lies with his mother, not with his wife.
But I also think, though, on some level, and I do genuinely feel for the many men out there as well, that someone will say, actually, I'm having to show my loyalty to mum, but ultimately my heart is somewhere else, and that's causing them a hell of a lot of conflict. So I do feel for the men that become almost stuck in the middle of it, and it's very challenging. And I know that some ladies come along and they kind of go, I get that, however.
yes, and that's where both parties need to really be responsible. The wife having the compassion and understanding that he needs to go through a healing process, because for years and years he has been mum's hero. So as much as he's moved on and he's now married, he still unconsciously holds a lot of guilt towards his mother. So any choice he wants to make in moving forward with his wife, whether he understands it or not, he can feel a lot of guilt towards his mother, and it stops a lot of his self-expression. It stops a lot of things that, from the wife's perspective, it's really frustrating. So it does take some work on both parts. The wife needing the compassion and needing to find ways of creating relationship with the mother-in-law understanding this is a dynamic. Imagine how many mother-in-laws may not be aware that this is what they're doing to their sons, and and it's all innocent. No, it's nobody's fault.
And I always kind of look at it going, actually think about it from our own perspectives of the technology, the freedom, the education, being in this country. A lot of our parents, if we're like second or third generations, originally came from, India or other countries or Kenya, etc. And actually they've come over here, they've learnt a new language, built a new life, and it's always been about, keeping the family close. So now we're in a times where actually it's okay to, it's okay to let your child out, out and about and doing their own things and becoming a lot independent. And I just think that some of those projections of a mother-in-law, some of them are kind of misunderstood these days, in my opinion, and it's not as tough as I think it was as we believe it to be, but equally we don't take the time to understand where's mother-in-law coming from.
Yes.
And we almost draw our battlegrounds, and bless him, the husband's in the middle.
Yes.
And it's like, how do I reach him, and that is sometimes where the fear's coming from, of going, I'm going to lose him, and that's a huge thing for some people. And I know one of the things that I love that you teach is how to manage that fear, that even when you think, do you know what, mum's muscling in, or them two are getting back to being tight again, even as a wife, you kind of think, well, I'm just been left on the sidelines, how do I deal with that?
Yeah. It is vital that she learns to stand in her own sovereignty. We call it sovereignty, knowing that you are whole and complete just the way that you are, and your husband is whole and complete just the way he is, and mother-in-law is whole and complete just the way she is. And what happens very often in those anxieties and those fears, we begin to collapse into each other. So we create codependent relationships, or dominant submissive relationships, or aloof codependent relationships, and it just gets, and that's normal, by the way. We hang out in all those different relationship types, but what's really important to remember is you are whole and complete. See, we're like beautiful roses.
Yay!
When we're grounded and rooted in our own garden, we blossom, we become, and the bee comes to us, i.e. the husband and the relationships with the mother-in-law and everything. But what tends to happen when we go into fear, we uproot ourselves and we go running after the bee. And in uprooting, if you imagine, if you took this out of water for very long, she begins to wither. All right, she loses her colour, her fragrance, her vibrancy, and then we complain why the husband is suddenly not too interested, or why his attention has gone somewhere else, or why. That's not to take responsibility for his lack of integrity or whatever may go on there, but in taking responsibility for self, it is so important to learn to maintain yourself with you. Very often we make somebody else responsible for our happiness, and we can't do that. And the mastery lies is, I am responsible for my happiness. Now that takes work, depending on where you're at, depending on how anxious you are, how much fear there is. There's work that needs to be done, but in essence, that is what needs to happen. We need to come back to self. Very often what happens is for a wife, men become like the sunshine, and she orbits around him. And what we need to do is we need to make sure to remember, you are your own sunshine, he is his own sunshine, and you can each be bright for each other. We need to remember that at the end of the day, you are whole and complete just the way you are.
Whereas very often we end up getting into relationships, and I use the classic boy meets girl in a Bollywood film or the Hollywood film, where it's all love and lightness. When you're first going out, everything's great, and as you get into the relationship, and that's when you go, oh, you're not paying me the same compliments as you once used to, And I always say that this is about expectations. What are your expectations? What are your values in a marriage? Because they may not actually be aligned, and you need to get yourself realigned. That's how I kind of interpret it, of going, well, do you know what, how do you know he doesn't love you? How do you know that he doesn't care? And, well, because he didn't take me out, and because he didn't offer me this. And I'm like, is that what your relationship is based on? Because I know that is the pattern of different love languages, right?
Yeah. And also, yes, love language for sure, which is a fascinating topic to look into. But I also believe that very often when we go into relationships, we have several images. We have the image that we have of ourselves, with ourselves. Then we have the image that we have of ourselves outwardly towards the world. There's two images. Just there alone, you are carrying two images. And then you have the image that your partner has of you, the image they have of themselves, and the image they have towards the outer world. So can you see already you're dealing with like 5 different layers of images, right? So of course there's always going to be an unmet expectation. So that's the majority of relationships are based on all those images, which is why it can be so frustrating. When people say to me, okay, Anna, so does that mean I shouldn't have expectations? I say this: I believe that before you go into a relationship, you need to be so clear on what it is that works for you. What are your values, as you mentioned? What are your non-negotiables? What is the most important thing to you? And then you once you know that, you sit and you wait. What happens though very often is we sell out and we go with the first one that comes along.
we do this, we do the panicking.
And we try, right, because I'm heading 40 and I need to hurry up or whatever it is, right? And the reality is, so we choose this one Joe Blogs, and I'm sure he won't be called Joe Blogs, and right? And you basically try and fit him or her into your list, when the reality is, you have your list of values that are your non-negotiables, okay? And people will either align to them or not. If they align, great, and if that person doesn't align, they are not your people. And you need to be prepared to move forward. Why? Because otherwise all we're playing is the game of wanting to change that person into something that you want them to be, but that's never going to work. And that's why so many relationships are complicated and they fail, because from the get-go we're not willing to wait to find the person that really does align. Doesn't mean they have to be the same as you, not at all, but that you align, that you're going in the same direction.
Where does that kind of flow with, say, relationships with other people in your household? Because again, I've learned over time that, you know what, you have your childhood friends, you have your university friends, then you get married, then you have a new set of family, but along the way, you know, you don't ever keep the same set of friends or family, if that makes sense. And for some people that's like, oh my gosh, I could never think about, how do you put it, going against the family. And we're not saying that for 1 second, so let me just clarify that, we're not saying that, but it is about a recognition of going, what grows you, as I like to call it, and having the right people around you. And sometimes making a decision of how much time you spend with people that don't grow you.
100%. And again, it's one of the biggest fears that people have, is abandoning or letting go of people who are no longer serving them on their journey. And I really believe in growth. Okay, so it depends. If growth is, now someone who's watching something like this, that tells me already you're someone committed to growth. So this is for you. What I would say is, I believe life, we're like buses, and people hop on and hop off your bus. They hop on and hop off your bus. Now, there are some people who are meant to hop on your bus and stay on your bus forever. There are some people who come on and come off at different times. The problem is when we're attached, because we have it that we need to keep our childhood friend or our childhood cousin or whatever it is, right? So we stand at the door not wanting to let this person go. And the problem with that is, not only are you limiting that person from their growth, but you are stopping the person that is next in queue to come onto your bus to help you grow. You're stopping them from getting on that bus. So when we're in fear, you have no idea how much you are stopping your growth journey. The moment you surrender and go, okay, you know what, I'm going to come from a space of trust, surrender, faith, love, and allow the people who no longer need to be on my bus off my bus. What does that look like? It may be some family members that you just choose to not spend that much time with. Why? If you could spend an hour with someone who's putting you down, who's judging you, who's criticizing you, versus an hour with someone who enlightens you, who has you feel really good and inspires you and encourages you, you're telling me you'd rather spend an hour with your cousin because they're your cousin? And it's not about turning your back on people that are blood, but it's about choosing, where do you want to spend your time? Use it wisely and value it.
Absolutely. There's a quote that keeps coming to my mind that I always look at, of going, when you sort of believe that you can't have something, you won't have something. But when you put time and effort into something, gosh, even if you thought you could never have it, you will get it. And I believe that with the blessing of God as well. And some people put a lot of their success down to a bit of luck, or I believe in God, or, you know, and I know we both have our own faiths, the way we follow it. But when then something goes wrong in our life, that's when we go, well, that didn't work, and then we kind of lose a bit of faith and we break away. And one of the images that you just talked about is keeping that trust. And I think that trust starts within us, right? It's not about, well, okay, I'll see him, I'll watch him, I'll see what he does. And if you're watching someone's every move, I still think you're in that snowball effect, right? You're still in that pain moment of going, it's their fault, it's their fault. You only truly know when you're in your own self-esteem, I think, is when you trust in yourself. And you kind of go, you know what, whatever games or whatever the other person is saying, let them carry on. Let them carry on. You be yourself, okay? Be yourself. If you know in your heart you're being sincere, truthful, kind, forgiving, then I feel that you see that change and shift happening so much more quickly, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So for many, married women that certainly even I've come across, they kind of go, but I don't know how to, I want an instant. And I'm kind of going, well, how long do you want to be in this marriage for? Because this isn't an instant thing. It's not I don't get married in one day, but come on, marriage is a lifetime. If you want it to be a lifetime, it can be. If you don't want it to be a lifetime, you don't have to be. But then, you have to draw the line as well. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is, it is all about keeping that trust, right?
Yeah.
And almost letting the problem go, because that's one of the hardest things, is that I am trusting, and going, okay, but you haven't let the problem go.
Yeah.
And that means distracting yourself, right?
Yeah. And it's a really interesting one, because very often when we're in fear, we tend to project outwards onto that person. Like, yeah, when they change their behavior, then I can trust them.
Yeah.
Or when they start giving me evidence of changed behavior, then I can trust them. The reality is this, and it's so much easier when you just trust yourself. See, when we don't trust others, who is it we're really not trusting?
Ourselves.
Yeah, that is it really. The day you really learn, and like really, one thing is to say, you know, I'm whole and complete just the way I am. And one thing is to really own that. Really step into knowing that you can trust you. When you can trust you, it's an incredible power. And it actually has very little to do with the other person, believe it or not. When you learn, see, a lot of people, they keep themselves in very miserable states, either constantly doubting or suspicion or not going into a relationship in the first place because they don't trust. They just don't trust, but ultimately they're not trusting themselves. They're not trusting two things. If they're single, for example, they're not trusting their own judgment of people. Can I trust myself to choose the right person?
Yeah.
And if I do and things go wrong, can I trust myself to pick myself up again when things go wrong? Now, when you learn to trust yourself truly, it puts you in a completely different energy, and therefore being able to bring into your life someone completely different.
Absolutely. I'm glad we touched upon that, because a lot of people, when this goes back to the earlier conversation we have, is the expectations, the tick list as I call it, the deal breakers as we've talked about, of going, if I don't have this, no, we're not going there. If he hasn't got this education, no, we're not going in there. And that is all about whose needs are you fulfilling, whose expectations are you fulfilling? Your own? Your families? Or is it what you want to actually show to the world of, look at me, I've got a successful partner on my arm? And I kind of go, success is about what it means to you, not what it means to the world and what you want to show. That's not to say, you know, don't aim high. Absolutely aim high if that's your aspiration. Like you exactly said, if it's already within you, you're going to attract that.
Yes.
If you're trying to, how do I put it, take from elsewhere, that's where the fear comes from, because everybody else is doing it and you're going, I'm getting left behind, help me. And that's where we mean that the fear kicks in, or the expectation. And again, we know, but certainly from, and I don't think this is just about Asian culture, I think it's across the board, of for many single girls out there, they kind of say it's, but it's the guy, I'm not meeting the right guy. You know, and I still think that's somewhere intrinsically linked to a belief they have about themselves, but they've just put the lid on it so tight. They're almost in denial of going, yeah, that's not me, that's your projection.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, of course. You know, look, what we want to understand is that there are two parts to us. There's the part of us that is saying, yeah, I want to be in a relationship, woohoo, yeah, I'm ready. Well, that's just 5% of you.
Yeah.
95% of you is running in the opposite direction. We call it the undercurrent. So you're going, yeah, I want a relationship, but 95% of you is going in the opposite direction, going, I do not trust myself, others, or the world. Yeah, remember what happened last time, or remember what dad did, or remember what, you know, all the examples that you've seen. So unconsciously, that 95% is unconscious. As much as you may be on dating sites, as much as you might be out there actively looking for somebody, the reality is 95% of you, most of the time, is going in the opposite direction. So we will make sure that you do one of three things. One, you will either not allow people to help you feel safe, you will try and go it alone. Miss Independent, right? Yeah. We see that a lot.
Yeah,
Number two, you will unconsciously set people up to fail, feel betrayed, and then say, see, told you, couldn't trust you. Yeah, we love that one. We don't like to admit that one.
Yeah, exactly. It's the man that we keep attracting and keep going, that's not me, I don't know why I attract this.
And ultimately, we just keep attracting people who are not worthy of our commitment. Now, a lot of women come to me and go, but why do I keep, I get a lot of, in this community, I get a lot of professionals, singles, for a very, you know, and their families are pressurizing them, oh my God, what's wrong? And she's come to a point where she's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm really starting to get worried. I'm like, there is nothing to worry about. What we need to look at is, what is your 95% doing? And all it's doing is keeping you safe. And she's like, what? But I want to be in a relationship. Yeah, I know, but 95% of you doesn't.
Just your that's the one that everyone's going, scrambled brain, what? I go to all these speed dating events, I'm on all these groups, I'm on all these websites, and you're telling me I don't want to get married? I know. That's what I'm going to say is, I know. And that's the challenge of this is, you know, that some of the work that we both do, I know, is all about how are you taking the right actions to move yourself forward, because you might be saying one thing but you're doing the completely opposite, right? And I know many people that kind of just sit there and go, yeah, but I'm happy just swiping, and that's all you are getting, because I genuinely believe there is a different approach to dating as there is a different approach to actually marriage.
100%. I'll give you an example. One lady I remember, I believe she was an Indian lady, and she's an accountant, very successful, very independent. She stood up to the mic in one of my programs, and she was there like, yeah. And she made the whole audience laugh. She said something like, every night I go on 2 dates, right? She goes on 2 dates every night, so she gets lunch and dinner or something like that, I don't know. And she's like, I love it because I get free dinners every night. It's like, wow. And she could see she's enjoying it. And then she got serious, and she goes, yeah, but you know what, I really want a relationship. And I said, are you sure? She goes, yeah, of course, that's why I'm here, I want a relationship. I said, I'm going to tell you as it is. Can I tell you as it is? And she goes, yeah. I said, you always win the game that you're playing. You're not playing the relationship game, you're playing the dating game. And the whole room just went, and I said, yeah, how many of you here, have you just realised you're playing the dating game?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, but how can that be? You have to date someone to... No, because if you go into it the mindset of dating, you're going to walk out with the mindset of no, just maybe not even a boyfriend, as I like to put it. But if you go into it truly aligned with your values and knowing what your values are for marriage, you're more easily likely to attract that.
Yeah.
You're like, really?
Yeah.
And yeah, because what you're projecting is the energy you're giving off, which is, I'm not ready to marry, but I'm ready to window shop, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's a fantastic energy that a lot of us, I mean, I've been there before, you know, and it was really fascinating to get her to kind of go, oh, and then I said, now are you ready to go deep? And she's like, yeah. And I said, well, why would you be playing the dating game if what you want is a relationship? And then we got down to the bottom of it. She's petrified. Yeah. She's absolutely petrified of getting it wrong. Because she had her heart broken before, you know, whether because her best friend ran off with her boyfriend. I mean, that's incredibly painful. And so she made an unconscious decision that she was never, ever going to put herself in a situation where she could be vulnerable again.
Exactly. And look, I'm in all seriousness aside, you know, I get that side, all jokingness aside, and on a serious note, I know the general challenges out there, which is why, you know, things like Sangat TV works so hard to put on events for not just about speed dating, but for me it is getting you aligned a little bit more closer to your values of who are you, what do you really want. I'm not necessarily saying, look, you have to go down a very traditional route, but it's being truthful to yourself, and that's where I think this honesty starts, right? This trusting starts from that honest conversation about what do you truly want? Why do you want it? When you can answer those for yourself without saying, because my family are telling me, because it's my, you know, my age is approaching, or whatever else, you have to truly identify with it. And again, you get the common comments of, you know, I do get the pain points as well when people kind of go to a wedding. You're the last cousin, you're the last one still sat there, and everyone comments. Saying, which basically means, have you found a man? And you're like, yeah, I'm on every site going, I can't find one. And look, you know, we're genuinely here to help you, support you, and almost reappraise the approach that you're using right now, because I think those are just the little things you can do. And trust me, it's the little thing is actually the big thing, right?
Absolutely.
We don't even know it, and that's the whole point of bringing awareness to what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I feel like we've explored so many, haven't we? Yeah. Are these more of the bigger challenges that most ladies from our culture face, or do you feel like there's any others that come to you?
I think the main one is the mother-in-law one, i.e. MEMS, dealing with MEMS, and secondly it's the successful professional who is getting that pressure from her family, and she's now thinking, oh my goodness, you know, I'm being left behind, I need to sort this out, and it becomes this vicious circle, and it's ongoing and ongoing, and she learns more and more how to get into a dynamic energy rather than her magnetic energy. So I would actually say that those, from personal experience, from the years of working, yes, I would say those are the two main issues. Would you say that there's anything else that you've identified?
I would say those are the classic ones. As I say, you know, relationships don't just start with the person you're married to and the mother. I think there's so many others to explore, and one of those things, or some of those relationships, are even looking within you of going, what was it like growing up from people? You know, because I think that also determines the kind of relationships you have when you're older as well. So the kind of environment that you've been around, or the thinking that you have. But yes, you know, for Asian ladies, I think those are the challenges we commonly deal with. I'm single, I'm married. For the divorce, sorry, go on.
I've just remembered one. Yes, you've triggered one. Thank you so much. And it's a very common one as well. So I'd say there's three. The third one is, I'm not happy in my marriage. For whatever reason. And I don't know what to do. I don't know whether it's right for me to leave. I don't know whether it's right for me to stay. Either way, I feel like I might be making the biggest mistake of my life. And that is a very, very common one. And it's a hard one, you know, because it's so encapsulated with the conditioning of I should stay for life. And where do I go? Where do I turn? I'm lost. I'm confused. And one of the things that I always say to women is, you're not confused. You're just petrified of taking action, whichever action that may be. Yeah. What do you find in that?
Absolutely, and I think there is that of going, you know, do you want to continue stagnating in the relationship you're in, or are you willing to do something about it? And most women come to us probably often going, I want to do something about it, but he's not willing to acknowledge his behaviour, or acknowledge his approach. And then you kind of say, like you say, the domino effects of all the other triggers start to kick in, of going, my children, my family, and what will my society say, and everything else. And I kind of come back to that same point of going, but okay, here's what we can do, which is work on you. And like you said, that begins to shift, make some slight shifts with the world around her, say some big shifts with the world around her, and that naturally then starts to see a different energy come forward within the husband anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think we're pretty much aligned on where we think, you know, of the challenges for a single lady, a married lady, divorced lady. Now, is she similar to the single lady, or do you feel that she's very different when she comes to you? As in, do you think her challenges just double what the single lady is? Or?
No, it's just a different set of challenges, and at the same time quite similar. So for a divorced lady, generally speaking, we're now talking children as well. Generally speaking, there's the pressure and the stigma that I better get it right this time. So today I was talking to one lady who's coming to my next event, and she's saying to me, Anna, it's my second divorce. I'm literally filing for my second divorce. I fought so badly in this, it was an abusive relationship. I fought so badly to keep this relationship because it's my second one. And so again, it's about dealing with the stigma. It's about dealing with the conditioning. There is something wrong if I'm not in a marriage at this age, or there is something wrong if I'm divorced twice. And you know, but she's reached such a pain point. She had no choice. You know, it was so painful. She had to abandon that. So it's about coming back to self. So that's the journey of going back. In all three cases, it's about learning to love you, learning to come back to you, and learning to teach others how to treat you. But you can only teach somebody else how to treat you lovingly when you learn how to treat yourself lovingly.
Absolutely. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you here and to be able to pass on so much knowledge.
Pleasure.
And absolutely beautiful conversations around, you know, some of the vast areas that we kind of keep as taboo, as I call. And I hope you viewers will agree at home, you know, that it's easy to sit there in what I call dock, which is pain, and almost be in denial of the challenges that you're going through, whether you are a single lady, a married lady, divorced lady. And I know we've, you know, largely talked about around ladies' challenges when it comes to relationships. I know there is many challenges out there for men as well. So I would encourage you, get in contact with Sungut TV. They will give you the details of how to contact both myself and Anna Garcia. So if you want more information and support, there'll be details that you can get from reception, who will then directly put you in contact with us, and we will both be happy, almost a privilege to serve you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is no challenge that I don't think between us two we can look to resolve for you, our viewers. Obviously, there is so much more that, you know, both myself and Anna would love to talk around. Unfortunately, the time has now come where we have to bid you farewell. I hope you really enjoyed the show. As I say, it's a 10-week challenge. I would encourage you to definitely explore your relationships and consider, you know, is there too much focus in there, and that's why some of the other areas in your life are not working, or can you get balance back by focusing on your relationships more at the detriment by re-looking at your wheel and seeing where you can balance out to give you more time on your relationships. So for now, I'll bid you farewell. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.